Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Going to get right to it here. We've got a couple of very busy storms with dangerous weather on both sides, and then changes coming next week that I'm going to explore with you guys as well. So, quite a bit to talk about here. My goal this year was to keep things simpler and shorter. I wish I could say that's going to be the case this week, but I'm all about getting this important information out to you all as a meteorologist here in the Carolinas. So, let's take a look at what's going on. And Obviously, you guys have heard about the storm that's going on now, another one to follow here later this week. I do want to touch on what's going to be coming in here next week because it will be very impactful. And while I believe it's truly important to talk about what's going on now, I think planning is very important, and you guys need to be focusing as well on what's to come here next week. So we're going to see cold and snow shifting south and east into areas that have seen very little of it over the last couple of winters. And that's going to come pretty quickly here early next week, with the potential for us to see a major amount of the U.S. covered in snow in the next, say, 10 to 12 days, which is a huge flip from what we saw here around Christmas time, where we had much of the country absent of snow. So some big changes are coming. I'm going to talk about the ingredients in place for that. I'm going to get back to that. Right now, we've got a dangerous situation unfolding in the southeast. We're dealing with multiple tornado warnings and a few confirmed tornadoes in the Florida Panhandle, also strong storms over eastern Alabama moving into Georgia. And that threat's going to shift north and east. You can see a very powerful cyclone on the map here and a second one following it. So let me circle these features for you guys here. Our low pressure system kind of in this area, this is the upper level low with it, and drawing a lot of Gulf moisture up, very fast wind flow aloft here, all of these strong winds. And they are turning with height. So we do have wind shear in place, leading to a dangerous situation. As the afternoon wears on, this area of strong winds aloft is going to shift northeastward and cross Georgia, northern Florida, the Carolinas, and even into southeastern Virginia. And we've got extreme amounts of rain and wind coming to the northeast as we head into tonight and the first part of the day tomorrow. On the cold side, significant rates of snow continuing to fall. We had blizzard conditions, even some thunder snow in Dodge City, Kansas yesterday. Those conditions are going to continue into the Great Lakes region today and tonight and up into Eastern Canada tomorrow. So much snow has fallen that you can see all of these colors in here indicating very cold ground. Albedo is the scientific term, reflection of heavy amounts of snowpack. You can see just incredible amounts of snow showing up on the infrared here across the Rockies. So that is setting the stage for colder weather, as that air that is coming out of Canada here later this week and into next week is going to cross this strong amount of snowpack. And before it does that, we've got another storm system that's going to kind of follow the same track as the one that we're dealing with now. So just so much to talk about. It is overwhelming, just to be honest with you guys. But here's the map, and you guys get the picture here. Green indicates flood watches in the east. Pink indicates winter storm warnings in Maine and across the northern plains. And red indicates blizzard warnings. We see that in the central plains as well as interior parts of the northwest. And a tornado watch in yellow here over parts of the eastern Gulf states as well. I expect we'll see tornado watches this afternoon over northern Florida, eastern Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, especially the eastern halves of those states, as conditions are expected to be very dangerous with strong winds and a few tornadoes, which could be strong. Here's a look at our temperature anomalies. We can see some cool air comes through here the next few days, but overall the east stays warm through the weekend. That will be contrast with much colder air invading into the north and west. This is a piece of the polar vortex, and it is going to drop down into the northern Rockies and plains here. This time frame is Saturday, and we're going to see much below average temperatures. That will expand south and east all the way down into the western Gulf region here next Tuesday. So a week from today, we are flipping the script from much above average temperatures to much below average temperatures. Very cold air in place. So it's going to be kind of a whiplash situation here. And then that cold remains in place right through the end of next week, with a new surge coming down the following week into Western Canada. And that's going to take aim at the same location. So a lot of this cold, it gets modified by the new snowpack that we're seeing in parts of the northern Rockies and parts of the northern Central Plains and the Ohio Valley. We're going to see some snow here as well here later this week. So a big flip coming here in the temperature department. You've heard me talk about that being the case here this winter, as we were going to start mild and eventually see a shift to colder right around the midpoint of winter, which we're basically approaching at this point. Here's what the GFS model is showing as far as snow. This is storm one. I'll show you guys more detail in a bit. Here comes storm two into the west, and that is going to follow almost a similar path to the first storm. And then next week, we see another storm, and that one can very possibly bring some snow down into Tennessee, into the Carolinas, into the eastern states. Obviously, the closer to the coast we get, the less chance we see at significant snow, but enough that could certainly cause some issues. So, a big flip here. Look at the snowpack across the country right now. It's building, but it's not really there. But look at what it looks like in a week, as some parts of the West are dealing with the potential for 12 feet of fresh snow between now and 228 hours from now. So, not going to get into too much detail on this. As you all know, it will probably change, but you get the picture that we're going to see a lot more snow in parts of the Northeast, in parts of the plains and Midwest, and extreme amounts of snow coming into the interior of the Northwest, even including places like Portland and Seattle and just north of the Bay Area in California. Here's a look at our storm tracks, and you can see just a huge windstorm here across the east. The first low is tracking through the Great Lakes. It'll bring some warm air up with it, so snow may go over to rain in parts of southeastern Michigan, southwest Ontario. A lot of wind behind it. We're going to see snow and wind across Chicago and Milwaukee here this afternoon and evening. Very heavy amounts of rain up the East Coast, just a complete flood hazard for many of us that have seen a lot of rain, especially in parts of the Northeast where we also have snowpack. So New England, this is going to be a very serious situation. It's going to hit very hard and very quickly here with intense amounts of rain through tomorrow morning, and then things are going to dry out very quickly. But we do have a clipper moving through the upper Midwest. We'll see some light amounts of snow across Michigan after this cold air moves out, or I should say after the mild air moves out and the cold air returns. And then our next storm drops down. And this time we see much colder air. This 1047 millibar high dropping down from Alberta indicates our coldest air mass of the season so far. And what that's going to do is flood in behind the next storm and allow things to quickly ice up. So travel is going to be very difficult Friday night over this area that's getting blasted with heavy amounts of snow. And the low here is going to follow the same track. It's going to strengthen. Winds are going to crank up. But it will follow with a colder air mass. So rather than us seeing kind of a snow to rain to maybe some light snow mix, this could have the potential to bring some pretty nasty snows behind it. Here's our next storm moving into the Northwest here this weekend. Some ice possibilities on the I-5 corridor before a change to snow as it gets colder, as this big high drops down early in the next week. And we see the chance for winter weather start to increase over parts of the South. Now, this is still a pretty big question mark. Just to be honest with you guys, I'm telling you, like I tell my friends, it's 6-7 days away. It'll probably change some, but the pattern is in place to see the cold coming down, meeting up with some moisture here in the Gulf, and likely to produce some form of winter weather. If I showed you the European, you might get a little too excited. I'm not going to do that yet, but you will see that we definitely see rather than us stressing about a rain snow line in New York, Philly, and Baltimore, we see a better chance that this goes over to snow. Is it a guarantee yet? Of course not. This is 7 days away, but certainly the pattern is becoming more favorable for something like that to happen. And it stays pretty cold right through the end of next week. More chances for winter weather potential here. And we don't need to see confirmation on the models 12 days out just yet to know that it'll still be cold and unsettled. Just take my word for it at this point. All right, let's look at this current storm. And you can see on the NAM model here is where all the rain comes through. We see kind of a squall line setting up from West Virginia to Florida. This is about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon. And then we see heavy snow moving into interior New England, some ice across portions of the Ottawa area into the Montreal area as that warm air comes up and over the colder surface air. And we see snow falling across the Great Lakes region and then even all the way down into parts of Tennessee and certainly across the southern Appalachian. Snow expected here tonight. And it's going to be very windy as well. Very windy on the warm side of this storm across New England. You can't really see down the radar, but I'll show you some detail. And then that storm very quickly exits tomorrow night. We see a weak clipper system moving through the Great Lakes here. Don't ignore that as it could put down some nasty amounts of snow briefly. And then our next storm starts to move into the west here on Thursday. The NAM doesn't go out that far. Here's a look at what the official forecast snow is with this storm. And two areas we're concerned with, mainly eastern Iowa, southwestern and southern Wisconsin, northwestern and north central Illinois, and northern parts of Michigan. We see potentially 6 to 12 inches, but there will probably be some more, 13, 14, 15 inches somewhere in here, maybe around La Crosse or just south. right here in the three-state region of Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. And northern Missouri is going to see significant amounts of snow as well. We see snow in the mountains here, not a surprise, but not a lot as we get towards the I-81 corridor, very little. And then we also see an area of snow as the milder air moves in, all the moisture shoots up and over here. It'll still be cold enough for heavy snow across parts of northern New England, with amounts likely getting over a foot in some places. That is the first storm that we're looking at. Now let's take a look at the next one. We do have this little clipper here, and the GFS says there could be a couple of inches in Iowa and Minnesota. I would generally forecast 1 to 3 in most places, but there will be spots that do get kind of gypped out of that. Next big storm coming, look at Salt Lake City, potentially 9 inches of snow here with our next system. Colorado Rockies get hit pretty hard. Big snows in New Mexico and Arizona in the higher elevations. And then we do see a split in the models here with the exact track of the next system. This is Friday morning. Nebraska and maybe northern Kansas, Iowa, and northern Missouri get it, but still some uncertainty on where exactly that snow band sets up. Whoever gets it is going to get it pretty hard, but you can see the GFS model is a lot more bullish on amounts of snow in northern Missouri, central Illinois, and northern Indiana. The European model has this shifted about 200 miles to the north and west, and still some uncertainty. I would love to say 3 days from now, we're going to know exactly where this will be. The GFS has trended southeast. The European has not started that trend, but the GFS could be the trend setter, or it could end up correcting back. And I don't know yet how that's going to play out. So just kind of stay tuned right now. But know that we're going to see some potentially nasty weather here with possible blizzard conditions back in Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa and Missouri, and eventually maybe blizzard conditions around Lake Michigan as well. The time frame for that looks to be Friday afternoon, Friday night, and first thing on Saturday. But big snow totals possible here. And then next week, we've got yet another storm that tracks farther south. So Iowa and Minnesota probably miss out on that storm. But the Ozarks, even Oklahoma and Arkansas could see significant snow, and maybe even Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Ohio River. So stay tuned on this one here. It will likely change. Here's a look at what the European shows, and pretty good agreement on our first storm. Not a shock there at all. The next system, we see some pretty intense snow on the Canadian side of Lakes Erie and Ontario. Big snows over Michigan. Both the European and the GFS have amounts up to 20 inches near the thumb here and across northern lower Michigan. Big time snow coming. So we know the big storm is coming. How it plays out and what the onset looks like on Friday is still to be determined, but certainly that is coming. Now, the European does not have as much over New England on the front end, but the GFS says parts of Pennsylvania and New York into New England do get hit pretty hard. So there's still uncertainty on this one here. But definitely a big storm for Eastern Canada, big storm for the Northern Great Lakes, and potentially for the Southern Great Lakes as well. And if you're in Northern Indiana, I would love to say I know if it's going to be 4 inches or 14 inches, but again, I don't quite know yet. The GFS obviously is a lot more bullish on this one, shows a big storm for places like South Bend, Lafayette, Indiana, maybe even Champaign, Illinois. So stay tuned on that one. But you'll see the following storm comes in pretty quickly here Sunday night into Monday. So less than a week out, we're looking at a much more southern track. We see lake effect here. We just see the potential for a lot of folks to get hit with some heavy snow. The European would be just a nightmare for those of us here in the mid-Mississippi Valley, even places like Memphis. So the GFS shows there'll be some snow here, but it isn't looking like the European at this point. But the European says this is a huge northeast storm. The GFS says, yeah, it will snow in the northeast, but it's not going to be as big a deal. So stay tuned on that one. Let's talk about the issue at hand right now, the wind across the east. Big time wind gusts expected. A lot of you probably have schools letting out early, which I think is very reasonable because of the wind that we're dealing with. We don't want to deal with power outages in schools or buses that are on the roads this afternoon. So big time wind, 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts, basically from northern Florida straight on up into New England here in the next 24 hours. Rain intense. We see major rain this morning in Alabama. That's going to shift east into the Georgia and the Carolinas and right up into the Northeast here tonight. Some places have potential to see well over 3 inches of rain, maybe even 6 to 7 inches of rain before all is said and done. Then the GFS says we're going to get it once again here on Friday and Friday night. And so some places in the next 4 days have the potential to see maybe close to 10 inches of rain. Really tough to say where that's going to be, but there is that potential. It may be Western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, Northeast Georgia, could also be interior parts of New England. which would be bad news bears here with the amount of rain that we're seeing. We are seeing also a regional severe weather outbreak here across the southeast with an enhanced 3 out of 5 risk for the northern half of Florida, for the southern half of Georgia, southeast Alabama, shifting this afternoon up into the Carolinas, including the Midlands, including just south and east of Raleigh. Just a very nasty setup for strong winds and maybe some stronger tornadoes as well. The tornado outlook is certainly high here for a few stronger tornadoes this morning. We've already seen that in the Eglin Air Force Base area. Panama City now dealing with potentially a stronger tornado. And I think that threat continues over to Tallahassee into southwest Georgia this morning. We see a second area take shape here around lunchtime across the lower Savannah River Valley and spreading through the Low Country and the Midlands area of South Carolina. And I think this evening it'll be maximized around Myrtle Beach, Horry County into the Wilmington area and on northward toward Fayetteville, shifting into down eastern parts of North Carolina early tonight around 7 or 8 o'clock. Powerful winds as well. Let me get myself out of the way here so you guys can see. Sorry about that. Powerful winds across this entire region. Whether or not we see an actual tornado, there will be strong wind. The tornadoes are more likely with individual discrete cells that lead out ahead of the strong line, but it will be tornado-like. So expect a lot of power outages and damage across this region. And there's a minor threat for some hail as well. We shift into Thursday and see Thursday evening, another area of severe weather, almost in the same place as what we saw last night, a little farther north this time. And that threat's going to shift up to Greensboro, Charlotte, Raleigh, even into Southern Virginia, and includes Atlanta and Birmingham. So this next storm is a little farther north than this current one. The dynamics are a little bit different, but they do support severe weather. We may not see as many strong tornadoes, but again, we could deal with wind damage, heavy rainfall, and it's just going to be on top of what we're getting now. So just a very nasty setup here. Look at today. This is the NATO cast. It's a machine learning tornado threat, and you can see the areas hashed out have the best chance for tornadoes. And I know this is a little tough to see, and I apologize for that, but mainly the eastern half of South Carolina, southeastern North Carolina, and as well as this morning around the Panama City area, right up to the Alabama border. Lots of wind shear here. We are actually seeing increasingly strong winds aloft that are going to be building in here, and kind of what we call a jet max coming in here this afternoon, which will enhance our risk for some tornadoes in northeast Florida, southeast Georgia. And we'll see a second area up here where parameters are pretty high here for tornadoes. And in the wintertime, we often do see this happen with our most intense cyclones. And this is certainly one of those. So one we don't want to take for granted here. As we get to about 5 o'clock, I think our tornado risk is enhanced to the point where it's maximized around Myrtle Beach and Georgetown. And we see this spreading northward. And a lot of these potential cells are going to be quick-lived. We'll have rain-wrapped tornadoes, strong winds, just a very messy setup here on radar, very difficult to track and chase if you are a storm chaser. But looking at the early evening is probably another chance we have to be watching out for potential tornadoes. It'll be dark at this point and raining very hard. And, you know, we could still see some down across central Florida here. We have a little bit of a risk near Tampa Bay late this afternoon, shifting towards Orlando and Sarasota here early this evening as well. So I'll start off with Florida here, a dangerous situation. Oh, that was yesterday's. I did see today's, by the way. Can't you tell this is a little bit overwhelming? All right, here we go. So we see dangerous weather across the panhandle this morning. One area moving out, next area moves in here. All kinds of strong winds with this. This will hit the Destin area around 7, 8 o'clock, and then shift to Panama City 8 to 9 o'clock. That's Eastern time, so take an hour off in Central. As we move on through the afternoon, Tallahassee gets hit right before lunchtime, and then we still see a threat for damaging winds and a few tornadoes hitting the Tampa Bay area around 4 o'clock, Gainesville around 2 to 3, Jacksonville 2 to 3, and then the I-4 corridor right around the evening rush. So Orlando could get hit pretty hard. We see some things weakening, but still a chance we could see a little bit of severe weather into this evening around the Space Coast, and then should start to diminish by the time things head into South Florida here this evening. But I would not let your guard down. Yes, the dynamics are better to your north, but there's still instability across South Florida. So late this evening, we could have a little bit of severe weather left over there. Looking farther north and east, this is where things are going downhill pretty quickly here. You can see this line is going to be moving into the south suburbs of Atlanta around 9 a.m. this morning. continuing across central and south Georgia this afternoon. The areas in South Carolina I'd be a little more concerned with are actually out ahead of this line, where there's going to be some enhancement in the wind fields here that allows for a few tornadoes. So keep an eye on some of these cells. I think once we get after about 2 o'clock, that's our best chance to see this severe weather, but kind of two waves moving through this area through the afternoon, and even this second piece coming through tonight, we do need to be watching very closely around 6 or 7 o'clock. Heading up into North Carolina and Virginia, we are going to see just a ton of rain here falling, winds ramping up quickly, flood threat over the Western Carolinas this morning, and then shifting east across the Piedmont this afternoon. Winds will crank up. We'll start to see more severe weather, especially south and west of Raleigh. And then as the late afternoon evening wears on, we see much of eastern North Carolina under the gun, potentially a tornado watch. Virginia, you've got a lot of rain and wind coming. I don't think we're going to see a lot of tornadoes, but I would not be shocked if we saw one or two. So keep an eye on that, especially down towards the Tidewater this evening. But things are going to move out pretty quickly, and it will turn much cooler overnight tonight. Here's a look. This was yesterday's run, so let me get you today's. But here's a look at areas that likely could see intense wind and some rotation in the thunderstorms. And you see a big area focused on northern Florida, southern Alabama, and central and southern Georgia. We definitely have to watch this area, not just for tornadoes, but rotating updrafts that can produce some strong wind. But we see the threat going all the way up into the foothills of the Carolinas and all the way down into South Florida here. Not only that, but we have strong winds cranking up right now over the Smokies. We're going to see those winds crank up as we head later into this morning. This is about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and winds ramping up in West Virginia, Western PA, even into southwestern parts of New York, south of Buffalo. Wind gusts could exceed 65 miles per hour. If you're in higher elevations, I would count on gusts over 75 miles per hour up to hurricane force. And then we see these winds ramping up very quickly over the Carolinas here, with gusts potentially getting over 60 miles per hour in places like Greensboro, Raleigh, Myrtle Beach, Columbia, Sumter, South Carolina, down to Valdosta, all the way down to Perry, Florida, and then expanding this evening northeastward up through the Delmarva region, through eastern Virginia, and into southern New England overnight tonight. Here's a longer term look at that, and we see still potentially 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts in coastal New England, 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts on Long Island, across New Jersey, the Delmarva, and especially over the coastal Carolinas here. Just really nasty. And we're going to see a lot of power outages, folks. There's really no way of sugarcoating that, unfortunately. So anyway, I really appreciate y'all's time today. I could go on, but we've got to get moving on with the duties of the day. I hope everybody takes these watches and warnings seriously, and I really do appreciate your time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider becoming a subscriber, as that helps me get this word out of this dangerous weather to everybody. So more to come on the next storm coming up and on next week's interesting weather setup. But I thank you all for your time today, and I give all the glory to God. He has blessed me with this gift to you all. My goal this year is to bless as many people as I can, and there's going to be some suffering in that, but I know that keeping my eyes on the prize is what's really worth it. As a Christian, I can relate to Paul. Romans 8:17 and 18, Paul tells the church of Rome and says, "And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." I believe that there's lots of folks that believe in a higher power, but they don't understand the fact that you have to suffer on earth to get the glory that God promises us. He's already brought his Savior Jesus to save us and cleanse us of our sins and allow us to live with him eternally, so that the sufferings that we have here on earth are only temporary, that the glory that awaits us in heaven is what's really there. And that's what I truly believe. I don't judge anybody who doesn't believe that, because I didn't for a long time, but I do know that the more and more that I proclaim this good news, the more and more I'm going to have to suffer. And that is quite okay with me, because I see that glory that God is revealing in me. And I know he's revealing it in lots of people that I come into touch with every day. It is a huge blessing. And I want to bless you in as many ways as I can personally. So if you have any prayer requests, I will be happy to pray for you. I hope everybody stays safe. I'm praying for everybody in the path of the storms here. Just know that I don't get kicks out of the kind of weather we deal with. I feel it's my calling to get people ready and to not take advantage of any situation. That's my personal feeling. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you again tomorrow morning. See you then.